So as I was saying there, the government is banning conversion therapy for gay and bisexual people in England and Wales, but not for transgender people. The announcement on Thursday came hours after it had said it would, or at least was reported, that it would drop plans for the ban entirely. The Welsh Government said it was seeking urgent legal advice on the issue. Was the government right to U-turn on conversion therapy? I'm delighted to say I've got quite the panel to discuss this issue. 3 guests join me now to discuss this. First up, we've got Debbie Hayton, transgender teacher and journalist, and Nikki DaCosta, former Director of Legislative Affairs, quite the tongue, at 10 Downing Street, and Simon Calvert, Deputy Director at the Christian Institute. Debbie, can I start with you, please? What did you make about this announcement and the back and forth, in, out, shake it all about approach that's gone on this week?
Well, I was concerned about the total confusion that erupted on Thursday night. As you said yourself, abusive and harmful practices are already illegal, and it's questionable why we need new legislation at all. The concern, as you pointed out, Darren, is children, and it's children who need a wide range of approaches, not just to be railroaded down an approach that says they're transgender. A child who goes to a therapist and says, I am transgender and I know I'm transgender, how would it be possible to help that child with the legislation that's been proposed? The therapists will be putting themselves at risk of being criminalised. Now, the government's U-turn on the U-turn suggested that transgender people would be kept out of this new law. So the government knows the problem. They're aware of the problem. But do they really think for a moment that if the government try to keep out transgender people from this legislation, there will not be equally hasty amendments made in Parliament, and the lobby groups will go wild over this to say, you're protecting cis people but not the trans. I do not think for a moment that law will actually go through unamended and we'll be back in the problem which we're so frightened about.
And Nikki, is that your concern as well? You've got vast experience of this kind of legislation going through Parliament. This is open to amendments, as Debbie so rightly says.
I think it's first of all worth clarifying what the particular problem is. So everyone would absolutely agree that conversion therapy is abhorrent in terms of how it's usually understood, and that those physical and verbal acts are already illegal under a host of different legislation. The specific proposal which is causing the issue is to capture talking therapies, and here the usually positive word about exploratory therapy designed to help an individual come to their own answers, as you described from your own experience, is being used in a negative sense as a talking therapy that might stop a child from being from being trans. And the reason this is important is because you described that cohort. We've got a very new cohort of children having gender dysphoria. It's completely changed in the last 10 years. That you've mentioned the 4,000 increase from about 130 to now 2,200 in the last year. 2/3 are girls. 35% have mild to severe autism. There's often a history of already identifying as gay or lesbian, suggesting internalized homophobia, prior mental health issues, and in addition, overrepresentation of those in care. And in addition, as we've seen the National Medicine Agency for France come out and say, we don't know of this cohort which will persist in their trans identity and which is just a normal stage of confusion in their adolescence. And so if you come in and legislate in this space, you better make sure that you define your terms about what is talking therapy, what is good talking therapy, what is bad talking therapy, and nobody's defining that. And I know I'm overcoming, but I just want to bring this together with the piece that you're doing later. We have a situation in which lobby groups are trying to take away from the ordinary meaning of words, for example, the use of talking therapy in a negative sense. And if you have a situation in which somebody wants us to weaponize and say that therapist, this child actually no longer feels that they're trans. They've identified, actually, I just felt really uncomfortable that I fancied that girl. And I'm speaking from, if that's the situation, and then somebody says, no, you have been subject to conversion therapy, you should go to the courts. And then you see therapists thinking, do you know what? I just can't put my family through that. I better not be in this space. And then you have this very vulnerable cohort, which is growing, not able to access support. And that's why it is nobody in this debate wants conversion therapy. What they do want to do is preserve good therapeutic exploration.
Absolutely. Simon, you've heard the two contributions there. Are you concerned, because I've seen the Let Us Pray campaign, are you concerned that future amendments to this legislation will actually start to chip away at religious freedom?
Yes, very much so. It's the ordinary work of churches that we're concerned about, because, as has been said, if people are victims of verbal or physical abuse, that's illegal, and they can and they should report that to the authorities. But what some people mean when they say conversion therapy is they mean churches teaching the Orthodox Christian faith. Now, the Christian faith has some things to say about what makes men men and women women, about sex and sexuality. The Christian faith has some things to say about that, which we know are pretty unfashionable. I believe them with all my heart, and many Christians do, but they're not fashionable. But some people, when they say conversion therapy, that's what they want the law to stop. The leading activist on this, Jane Ozanne, she's gone out of her way to be explicit that she wants, and this is the phrase she used, gentle, non-coercive prayer to be included in the conversion therapy ban. The prayer, if it's the kind of prayer she doesn't like, she doesn't agree with, she wants to see it banned. And you only have to look at the state of Victoria in Australia to see where this gets you. They have passed a law, a conversion therapy ban. It's only just come into force, so we haven't seen any cases yet. But the official state guidance on that says not affirming someone's gender identity as unlawful conversion therapy. It says parents not consenting to puberty blockers for their own kids is unlawful conversion therapy. And it says that churches withdrawing membership from people who reject the church's teaching on sexuality, it says that too is unlawful conversion therapy. We just simply cannot go down that route.
Yeah, I mean, Debbie, if we go back to that fundamental point that I raised at the very start there, the 4,000% increase in young people experiencing gender dysphoria, what do you think is going on there? What do you think actually explains? Because I left school in 2009, the numbers were significantly lower than they are now. Are there really just a lot of people that are suddenly feeling comfortable to say, look, I've got gender dysphoria, or is this part of a wider trend of something else?
Well, certainly the 4,000% increase is remarkable. This is a new group which has appeared, and it's largely girls, as Nikki said. The impact on girls growing up, learning what it means to be a woman, has always been a difficult issue for girls to take on. This almost seems to be a way out for girls who are struggling with adolescence, struggling with puberty, to opt out of that. Or they think they can opt out of it. In practice, we can't opt out of humanity. But that seems to me to be the approach which is being taken, to say, look, you can choose to grow up to be a man or a woman. You cannot, if you don't want to grow up to be a woman, you don't have to. That's what's the message which children are being given. And no wonder that so many of them are confused about it.
Nikki, you have experience, as we said at the very beginning, of being in number 10 Downing Street, the heart of power in this country. Why do you think the UK has failed with some Conservative parliamentarians saying that actually, as far as progressive pro-equality legislation is concerned, this country has fallen behind other countries like France and Canada?
Well, I disagree with that. And I think when you mention France and Canada, I'm assuming that you're relating to, because a lot of people say, well, these countries have already legislated, so why can't we? And I want to give you the examples. Yeah. The French legislation is 2 pages long. The Canadian legislation is 2 pages long. I've looked at the stages in both legislatures, and they had minimal debate. The terms are very ill-defined, and all the problems that we've laid out are not addressed. And what that means, and I know there was genuinely a school of thought and remains a school of thought in government, is that you could leave the terms vague and let it be sorted out in the courts. So Parliament can just shrug its responsibility. And the ordinary person, the clinician or the parent that is dragged before the courts to create the case law, to step in and take the responsibility, that's the solution. And that is absolutely unacceptable, particularly in this environment in which we see accusations of transphobia levelled at parents that simply wish to make sure that their child, before they go on a medicalised pathway, is certain, because these are big steps. I mean, I'm just going to say from a girl's perspective, the uptick when you go to 2/3 girls, it happens at age 11, suddenly, puberty. And it's when you're suddenly finding out what it's like to have, to be sexualized, the nature of our society, the things you're struggling with. And in that environment, girls are struggling with that. And so I ask people, before you start leveling accusations, where is your concern regarding the trends? Because as far as I know, you don't see those trends with people that are gay or lesbian. So something might else be going on, and you want to be certain first. Give them the benefit of at least exploring these issues.
Absolutely. I just, with my hand on my heart, just say to people, look, you might think it's the progressive thing to do to rush this sort of legislation through, but actually the unintended consequences, I fear, could well and truly be great. Thank you so much, guys. I could speak to you all day. That was Debbie Hayton, transgender teacher and journalist, Nikki DaCosta, former Director of Legislative Affairs at 10 Downing Street, and Simon Calvert, Deputy Director at the Christian Institute.